lost in the woods was a phrase my father used a lot. When I was young, should we be out in the world and witness someone acting out in any way? That boy's lost in the woods, he'd say, shaking his head in that parental disappointment sort of way, even if they weren't his child. When I reached my early teens, struggling to find my place amongst my peers, "You're lost in the woods, kid," he'd say, in a far more sympathetic and compassionate manner. I endured some hard times over the years while I tried to find where I belonged in the world, but my dad was always there for me. Though I wasn't exactly an outdoorsy type, his words were always reassuring, even if I hoped to never be caught dead in a forest, let alone lost in one. We would inevitably talk about my problems after he would diagnose my symptoms in his own special way. But I learned to understand how the same saying would read differently, depending on the situation. Even during those last few weeks he battled against the cancer devouring him from the inside out, he too was lost in the woods. I like to think that when he passed, when his suffering reached its end, he finally saw what lay beyond the trees. I suppose it was only fitting that it was, as I drove home from his funeral, that I found myself in a far more literal version of his all-purpose metaphor. Over that time, I became certain I would be joining my old man outside the borders of the forest, so soon after he made the trip himself. I had chosen not to ride with my mom and stepfather, Dale, as I wanted to be alone with my thoughts. I didn't have a problem with my mother's husband. He'd always treated me well enough. My parents had remained close after the divorcee, as they both agreed they were always better friends than lovers. Dad got along with his replacement better than most under such circumstances, but it always felt like Dale tried a little too hard when my old man was around. It may have been nothing more than the inherent jealousy a man feels towards his significant other's ex. Maybe he had some insecurities about the situation, but Pop and I would laugh about it when we were alone. I was always tight with my dad, far more so than anyone else in my life. With him being the one I would turn to when I needed to talk, I wanted to be alone on this one. I think I needed to. Had I ridden with my mom, Dale would have likely tried his damnedest to get me to talk about how I was feeling, which was not remotely ready to do. Even when the rain began to pour down from above, I was mostly mentally checked out as I guided my car from one road to the next. The spot in which my dad wanted to be buried was some miles into the next state over, the one he grew up in before relocating back in the day. While the path I traversed that day was somewhat unfamiliar, my subconscious was able to focus on the road while my mind drifted beyond the confines of my old Chevy. I suppose that's why it took me a moment to register the truck ahead of me, sharply veering into the other lane. By the time I noticed where the road had split, opening a wide fissure in the tarmac, I didn't have a chance to miss it. The collision, for lack of a better term for skidding into a large gap in the pavement, happened so quickly that I was only vaguely aware of what was happening before everything went black. The heavy rainfall we had been experiencing, off and on, for weeks, had led to a few of these fissures forming across the state. Be it from poorly maintained roads or simply years of water seeping between the cracks, I couldn't say. It wasn't exactly my area of expertise or anything. I remember my dad saying, sometime over that previous month or so, that the cities would be buried beside him by the time the dust settled. Maybe it was the medication talking, but he feared that hell itself may be reaching through the cracks, stretching its tendrils through the very foundation of reality to claim this world for its own, one stretch of road at a time. When my eyes blinked back to awareness, my dramatic shift in surroundings caught me off guard at first. While I had been at the helm of my old Chevy when I blacked out, the fact that I found myself laying splayed out on the floor of an unfamiliar forest took me a moment to fully grasp. The rain had stopped, leading me to believe I must have been out of it for a while. But when I pressed my palms to the ground to find it wasn't even damp, I began to question my sanity. "You're lost in the woods, kid," I heard echoing from the back of my mind as I hesitantly raised from the dirt to trembling and weakened legs. Attempting to rationalize my relocation while I slept, I assumed that someone must have pulled me from my likely crumpled car before dragging me into the middle of the woods that stood beside the road I was traversing. Why anyone would do this, I couldn't quite fathom. Maybe, I thought, more cracks opened up, so someone carried me in here. Perhaps they thought the road wasn't safe, so they dropped me off before going for help. Not the most likely rationalization, but it was something. While I gazed around my newfound surroundings, seeking out any indication of which direction would lead me back to the road, I became more aware of the unsettling silence. Being the middle of winter, the bare, skeletal trees and dead leaves lining the forest floor didn't feel out of place, but I could find no evidence of anything else alive out there. Glancing upward, the blank and gray sky appeared as lifeless as the world around me. I couldn't even feel a breeze. While I still wore the suit I donned for my father's funeral, one that wasn't exactly made for winter weather, it wasn't as chilly as I would have expected. It wasn't warm either, mind you, but everything felt wrong somehow. The colors looked muted in a way. The bark of the trees was an almost sickly grayish-brown. The discarded leaves scattered across the ground were more yellowed and diseased-looking than what I would have expected. Even the drab sky felt more like a ceiling over the woods than a vast emptiness, adding a strange sense of claustrophobia to my already scattered senses. While all I could hear was my heartbeat against the inner walls of my ears, the crunching beneath my feet when I finally took a step almost caused me to recoil. Being out in the wilderness, surrounded by such emptiness and quiet, was far more unsettling to me than how I ended up here in the first place. I was in a daze while I trudged onward in no particular direction. With only more stripped-down trees being all I could make out in any direction, I had no way of knowing which potential path would be the right one. Regardless of my uncertainty, I knew I had to keep moving. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had the strangest sense of urgency, assuring me that I must reach the border of this forest as quickly as possible. The scenery remained unchanging, even after walking for what felt like a few hours. At the beginning of my stroll, I'd fished my phone out of my pocket, only to see the broken screen and the absence of any backlight or life behind the shattered glass. Given that the last thing I remembered before waking in this place was crashing into a damn hole in the world, it wasn't hard to accept that my device had not survived, even if my body was somehow unscathed. I have no idea how much time had passed when the humming sound began. That's about the best way I can describe it. A hum that started soft, growing steadily louder, as if something was approaching. Had it not been for the almost suffocating quiet of my surroundings, I likely wouldn't have even noticed it until it engulfed me, if that was indeed its intent. For all I knew, the unsettling vibration that accompanied it was something good, something I should approach rather than run from. Ultimately, I wasted no time deliberating the options, opting to transform my stroll into an outright sprint for my life. With the noise originating from behind me, I could only hope that speeding away from it was the right call. To fully illustrate where my head was at the time, I think I assumed that I had landed in some sort of purgatory, somewhere between life and death after the accident. Being that I saw no sign of the road I had quite literally crashed into, it seemed a reasonable assumption. With that working theory that I must escape these woods to reclaim my mortal shell, my immediate fear was that the sound belonged to that which would send me to whatever afterlife awaited me. That, or it was something far more sinister, perhaps intent on leading me to the gates of hell itself. When a subtle mist joined the ambient and elevating hum, gently caressing the forest floor beneath my quickly tiring legs, I grew far more certain I had to escape whatever was happening. While I ached from head to toe, something that somewhat contradicted my theory of being absent of living flesh at the time. My frenzied thoughts were interrupted by the ground shifting to a steep downward slant. For the briefest moment, I felt weightless as my feet found nothing to land on, slipping on the dried leaves when they finally did make contact. I was so caught off guard, having been otherwise occupied by both my surroundings and the oncoming storm. For lack of a better term, my mind fought as much as my flailing limbs while I tumbled towards more uncertainty. If nothing else, when my fall came to an end with my body splayed out, face down on another unfamiliar bed of dried leaves, the humming vibrations felt further off again. My mind fought to remain conscious as the dizziness of my quickly paced descent caused the world to spin around me, but I could not allow myself to pass out here, not with whatever was pursuing me. As I pushed my palms against the ground, struggling to get somewhat upright before the darkness could swallow me whole, something happened that most certainly brought my wavering consciousness back to my dire circumstances. "Stay down, friend," the stranger, who seemingly appeared out of nowhere, said, pushing me back down by the shoulder. Regardless of his encouragement, I landed hard, having completely lost my footing, being surprised by the unexpected touch. "What? Who the fu—" "Shh," he said, crouching down beside where I now sat. "Just let it drift on by." I followed his gaze back up the steep hill I had tumbled down, to see that dense, white fog lining the woods above like a cloud. While I had assumed the unusual mist to be something chasing after me, the full weight of that irrational thought didn't sink in until I watched it shift directions some 30 feet above. While it was so thick, it almost reassembled an enormous, sentient cotton ball. It had ripples throughout, like waves running against the direction of a stream, spiraling endlessly as it hovered in place. It was somewhat confusing to look upon, the way it jerked one way with the bizarre rapids flowing backward, but it was clear that some sort of consciousness guided it. After it pulled to the right and left, swaying this way and that, it finally came to a halt, spinning around and around as though waiting for something or someone in this case. While I didn't know whether or not I should trust my new companion, his reassuring grip on my shoulder helped more than I could understand at the time. Though I hadn't looked at him yet, just having someone by my side, after hours of solitude, trudging through this seemingly never-ending forest, encouraged me to remain as still as possible. We both continued to glare upwards, even after the fog began to dissipate, before drifting back the way it came. For some minutes after its retreat, I was scared to move a muscle, even after the stranger let his grip on my shoulder slip free. "Should be okay. For now, anyway," he said, lifting himself back from the ground. "What was that?" I asked, getting to my feet. Finally, having the opportunity to take in the appearance of this man, I felt a little more at ease, noticing the uniform he was wearing. It was similar to a police outfit, but one I recognized as more of a park ranger's garb. I hadn't spent a lot of time in such places over the years, but I was certain that's what it was, plus it fit considering our location. He looked a little older than me, thin but in decent shape. He pulled his wide-brimmed hat from his short brown hair, wiping his sweating brow with the back of his forearm. He had a neatly trimmed beard, a few shades darker than his hair, and stood a couple of inches taller than me. "Nothing you want to get caught up in," he said, placing the hat back in place. "That's a damn fact." He looked back at me, giving me a small smile. It was then that I noticed that his eyes were an almost translucent sky blue. Though I assumed he was likely wearing some sort of novelty contacts or something, they were still almost mesmerizing. Of course, given the fact that everything around us was so lifeless, drowned in muted, depressing colors, it may have been nothing more than the stark contrast of something so lively amid everything else appearing so lifeless and cold. "Tucker," he said, holding a hand out. "Maxwell Tucker. Ranger Tuck. Round these parts." "Nathan Solomon." Nate," I replied, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you, Nate. Let's get moving, yeah? Yeah. The more we talked as we walked onward, continuing in the direction I was going, something I wasn't entirely sure of, considering that my tumble had potentially altered my trajectory, the more I felt comfortable with the guy. His voice had a friendly tone. There was something warm and inviting about it, like I was chatting with an old friend, rather than someone I had only just met. He spoke of strange occurrences in these woods I had apparently been alongside when the road swallowed up my car. While I didn't want to get into said strange occurrences, being that I was already freaked out by everything, I still couldn't figure out how I had ended up here, so far from my likely totaled Chevy. Likely, Ranger Tuck said. It dragged you in here, deep into the heart of it. Wouldn't be the first time. It? It. Who? Folks round here just call it the Gray. It seems to enjoy messin' with folks, the ones that don't finish off right away anyway. Wait, I said, stopping in place. So some guy screws with people, leaves them for dead, or just straight out kills them? He just tilted his head with a shrug. And that's okay? Like, the police won't do anything about it? You Rangers just let it continue? Some sick bastard is loose out there, and you guys never said it was a man. It ain't exactly something that fits into normal conversation, you know? Nah, friend, this ain't nothing natural sneaking through the cracks. Can't say what it is, but it ain't bound by our laws. Okay, I said, attempting to push aside my disbelief for the time. Why all this then? Why drag me, God knows how far, into this damned place, only to leave me to wander around? It likes games, for whatever reason. It enjoys the hunt, the chase. We've been able to save some, but most end up the same way, whether it does it right off the bat, or after making them think they got a chance. Suppose it depends on what kind of mood it's in at the time. Could be you just got lucky. Lucky? Are you serious? I crashed my car, ended up in the middle of this dismal freaking forest, and damn near broke my legs running from a cloud, which I can't even believe I'm saying with a straight face. What the hell should I feel lucky about? You found me, he said with a smirk and a wink. So, you ready to get out of here, or what? While I can't say this especially put me at ease, his carefree expression did make me feel better about things. Yes, it would seem I was only one of many to fall victim to the Gray, whatever the hell that was. But Ranger Tuck had seemingly witnessed what this thing was capable of and lived to tell the tale. I had to believe I was in good hands. I still didn't speak much as we plundered onward, but I did feel hopeful that I would see the other side of this. Given that neither the accident nor the tumble down the hill left me as beaten and bruised as they could have, maybe my wandering companion was right. Perhaps I was lucky. That's what I began to believe anyway, right before the fear took hold of me once more. Run, Tuck said, having noticed the approaching fog before I did. When I grew aware of that humming sound once more, my heartbeat quickened faster than my feet at first. Though we did as he demanded, both of us sprinting as hard as our legs were capable of, those smoky tendrils began to wrap around our surroundings, weaving between and around the trees on both sides. It almost felt as though it was attempting to flank us, to force us forward rather than allowing us to veer or separate. Don't slow down, the ranger called out, noticing the power behind my strides dwindling. I was doing everything I could to force one leg in front of the other, but when the sound of the thick bark cracking and splitting reached my ears, it took everything I had to remain upright, let alone continue charging onward. I felt the fingers of my companion wrapping around my wrist as he pulled me alongside him. How he still had so much strength in his extremities, I had no clue, but his encouragement and support succeeded in filling me with more purpose and drive to keep charging toward the hope of freedom. Don't let up, he said, not so much as glancing from the path ahead. We can make it, just keep pushing. You can rest when we get out of here. Regardless of his determination, The sight of those wispy tentacles now weaving themselves around the trees ahead assured me that our options were running out. As the misty fingers entwined before us, sealing the path ahead shut, we both practically skidded to a halt, falling back to the forest floor. The white smog formed a dense, misty wall in a circle around where we lay, leaving only the ground and sky free of its grasp. It was over. Whatever game it had been playing had reached its conclusion. The time had come for it to claim its prize. There was nowhere to go. Not unless the ranger who already saved me once had a set of wings or a fast-acting shovel he hadn't informed me about. "I'm sorry, friend," he said, glancing back at me as we lifted ourselves from the ground, preparing to meet our shared fate. As the flowing rapids within that ivory smoke continued to spiral around us, I felt my heart racing so quickly I feared I may pass out any second. While the idea of not being conscious to experience whatever was to happen next did seem an almost welcome sensation, my mind and body were scattered to the four winds at that point. "It's not your fault, Tucker," I said, attempting to fend off the trembling in my voice. "If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead already." The cylinder of dense fog began to shrink, closing in on us from every angle, stopping its approach only feet from where we stood. "You're not following me," Tuck said, slowly drifting his head all around. It looked as though wispy feet were stepping from the fog, as though a ghostly army was hidden away within. More mist flooded upwards, forming some sort of spider-webbed dome above us. As legs began to trail out, followed by almost translucent bodies, the smoke peeled away between each one, like cotton candy being separated. "That ain't what I'm sorry about." As the arms reached from each misty torso, every one of them with elongated fingers, ready to snatch us up from where we stood, my companion moved so quickly my mind hadn't a chance of understanding what was happening. "I'm sorry I can't go no further with you," he said, gripping my shoulders in his hands. "Just keep running and don't look back." Before I had a chance to protest or otherwise argue against it, I felt my feet lifting from the dried leaves as my body was launched through the gap ahead, tearing through the already torn strips of dense, stringy fog. "Go," I heard screaming out from the strange ball of wispy energy as a light began to illuminate from within. While I wanted to fight back, to free the one who had thrown me to freedom as effortlessly as if he were tossing a towel into the laundry hamper, I wouldn't even know where to start. While the ripples of smoke encased him, the high-pitched, shrill squeal that accompanied the vibrant glow damn near turned my hair white. "Go!" His now almost tortured voice shrieked once more, sounding as though he was experiencing a pain I could barely fathom. Whether it was simply my desire to escape that inspired me to do as he commanded, to get off my ass and run even harder than I had before, or just that I knew there was nothing I could do to help him, I can't say, but I was ashamed of my actions, nonetheless. Not only had he saved my life twice by this point, but I had to believe he was sacrificing himself to save me. Given the tortured howl that wailed out from behind me as I sped onward in search of safety, I was certain this was the fate met by those other poor souls who encountered the Gray. When the agonized scream bled into an explosion, sounding as though it fragmented those trees surrounding where the ranger made his final stand, the shockwave tossed me back to the forest floor like a rag doll. As I lay there, feeling my consciousness slipping back into the black, I couldn't tell what sort of condition I was in. My mind slipping, I tried to push up from the dirt and dead leaves, but that concussion had drained every ounce of strength I had left. Before my eyes closed, dropping me back into almost blissful darkness, I heard a familiar voice, one that was almost surprising enough to keep me from drifting away. "You're gonna be all right now. See you around, friend." The hospital bed I awoke in felt heavenly after passing out in the woods, or so I thought anyway. When my mom came running up to my bedside, with Dale smiling down at me by her side, I was still out of it. Be it from whatever they fed into my veins to take the edge off the pounding in my head, or simply whatever damage lay beneath the gauze around my scalp and forehead, I had no clue. We talked a little while we awaited the doctor, my mother trying to fight back the tears that streamed down her face, with my stepfather's arm wrapped around her midsection. Though what she told me didn't quite match up with my recollection of things, that it took the firefighters and paramedics some time to pull me free from the wrecked car, halfway swallowed up by the fissure in the road. I didn't fully register the implications at the time. When my doctor arrived, stating that he was confident the surgery performed on my cracked skull had been a success, I still assumed the injury to have been caused by the shockwave throwing me to the forest floor. The cast around my left leg, as well as the bandages around my left wrist and both hands, would take less time to heal than my fractured dome, but he felt certain I would make a full recovery in due time. Over the months that followed my short stay in the hospital, I went through a good deal of work to retrain my broken body and mind once I had healed enough to do so. Before long, I was cleared to return to work, having made a full recovery from my injuries, as the doctor had predicted. The 3-inch scar across my hairline isn't too noticeable, and neither are those across my wrist, but the marks on my hand from the mincemeat left in the wake of my windshield crashing down on it stand out like a literal sore thumb. Still, some battle scars are a small price to pay, all things considered. Once life returned to normal, I took a short trip one weekend back to the woods I had crashed alongside. It took me a while to locate the ranger station, but I had to find out if Maxwell Tucker was real or just a figment of my fractured mind. While I hoped this could provide some answers about what I truly experienced that day, I also wanted to be able to thank him for what he did for me. When I pulled up beside the quite lovely log cabin that appeared to house the rangers of this slice of the forest, a uniformed man and woman leaning on one of the jeeps gave me a wave. While I thought about beginning with a little small talk as I climbed out of my dad's old truck to approach the two wearing friendly smiles, I thought it best just to get right to the point. "Hi," I said, tipping the brim of my baseball cap. "Would you happen to know if Ranger Tucker is around?" "Tucker?" the tall, broad-shouldered guy asked, glancing at his associate. The woman, who looked to be in her mid-30s or early 40s with her dark hair tied into a ponytail beneath her wide-brimmed hat, formed a strange sort of scowl as she blinked from her colleague to me. "Only Tucker we had around these parts ain't around anymore," she said, squinting her eyes as she studied me. "Oh, Maxwell Tucker? Is that him? Ranger Tuck?" "Uh-huh," she said, giving me a very strange look. "He used to work with us some 15 years back." "Oh, wow. I could have sworn he was around my age," I said with an awkward laugh. "Do you happen to know where he is now?" "Same place he's been for a decade and a half, son," she said, gesturing to the left with a tilt of the head. When I turned to see the small cemetery up on the hill, I felt all of the blood drain from my face, my legs giving out beneath me. "Whoa now," the woman called out, she and her partner catching me before I hit the ground. After they carried me inside, laying me on a lumpy yet comfortable couch, the tall man fetched me some water, while one of the others laid a wet towel across my brow. After my heartbeat regulated, Ranger Angie Temple, who had helped me inside, accompanied me on a stroll up to the old boneyard. We talked a good deal over the hours that followed. While I was hesitant to tell her about how I met Ranger Tucker, she told me a good deal about the man who consequently saved both of our lives. She was still green around the gills back then, with Tuck being her trainer. One day, some 6 months after she joined the Rangers, they responded to a call about an attack out in the woods, those that ran alongside the road that swallowed my car. Assuming it to be a bear or some other wildlife having jumped some innocent campers, they headed out to the scene armed and prepared. I felt like my damn heart was about to burst through my chest, but Tuck looked just as calm as if he was walking to the kitchen to fetch a snack, Angie said with a chuckle, running her hand across the tombstone bearing his name. When they arrived to see a large, shaggy-haired man with a pistol trained on the crying teenage girl he held and a butane torch in the hand wrapped around her, she was uncertain if this was something they could handle. The boy around her age laying on the ground, bleeding upon the leaves, looked like he was long gone, but all of this was enough for the fear to almost paralyze her where she stood. Again, Tuck still wore that carefree smile as he tried to calm the situation, attempting to convince the disturbed man to release his hostage. For a second there, I thought he was going to pull it off, Angie said, a tear leaking from her right eye. But when the big guy raised the gun, pointing it right at me, pushing the girl he held to the ground, I knew I was done for. She lowered her head, still caressing the gravestone like a dear friend. The sadness etched into her gaze almost inspired my own eyes to leak as hers did, but I tried to fight them back. As soon as he raised that pistol to me, Tuck jumped right in front of me, knocking me out of the way. How he knew he didn't have time to get a shot off before the gun on me discharged, I'll never know, but it all played out in seconds, right in front of me. When the bullet dropped him to the ground beside me, I'd already fired off 3 rounds myself. At least one of the shots hit the canister the bastard held, blowing it apart and lighting him up like Joan of Arc in seconds. He still tried to fire off the shots he had left, while he screamed out from the well-deserved pain. I jumped towards the girl to pull her away before she got caught up in the flames or the gunfire, but it was too late for Tuck. He was gone before he hit the grass. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us staring down at the headstone. When she spoke again, I once more found myself lost for words, bewildered by everything she shared with me. The man we took down that day turned out to be one foul son of a bitch. Seems he'd been killing folks for years, until Tuck and I put an end to him. If nothing else, I take some solace in knowing that Tuck was the last victim of Jeremiah Gray. Gray? I said, almost more to myself. Yup, she said, crouching down to wipe some dirt from the tombstone. Won't see no grave for him, though. Don't know what they did with what was left of him after the fire died down, and don't give too much of a damn either. He took Tuck away from us, and he deserved that agonizing end. When the law arrived, all that was left was a crispy frame billowing plumes of thick white smoke. According to Stacy, the girl we saved that day, Gray had kidnapped her about a week before. He tortured her some over that time, finally setting her loose in those woods. He told her he'd let her go free if she got to safety, but if he caught up to her, he'd put her through hell. The boy bleedin' on the grass was the one who called it in, having witnessed what was happening while he was taking a hike. Poor kid didn't know what hit him when Gray got there before we did. I never told her the full story about how I came to meet Maxwell Tucker, nor the implications of what or who we perhaps both faced between those trees. We talk a lot since I joined the Rangers soon after that meeting. We still talk about Tuck as well. While I may never have had the opportunity to really get to know the man who saved me from a potentially grim fate that day, those who knew him in life have shared with me a great deal about him. Over the years that followed the death of both Maxwell Tucker and Jeremiah Gray, there had apparently been some strange occurrences out in that forest. Someone would go missing from time to time, others would turn up dead. Now and then, though, one of those presumed dead would turn back up, confused about what happened. Even after they closed that section of the woods to the public, it wasn't easy to keep those curious enough to enter from sneaking in. A forest isn't something easily blocked off completely, but they still did what they could. While those who survived these strange occurrences had no recollection of how they made it out alive, I know how they reached safety or who led them to it anyway. Whatever the case, ever since my encounter with the Gray, these unsettling events seem to have come to an end. I like to think that Tuck finally finished that son of a bitch off for good that day. While I want to believe that this may have allowed him to move on to whatever lies beyond this world, I have a feeling he's still out there watching out for us. I spend a lot of time out in those woods. It's a strange sensation how vibrant and alive everything appears on this side of the looking glass. Still, should I ever have an opportunity to thank Maxwell Tucker for what he did for me, my best chance would be out there. Plus, if he is still out there, it's only fair that I keep watch on this side, just in case our old friend returns. I still miss my dad. I suppose I likely always will. That's the nature of loss, after all. Now that I feel like I've finally found my place in this world, I just wish I could tell him, you know? I wish I could let him know that his son is no longer lost in the woods, but found where he belongs within them. I doubt that either of us could have predicted that one. Hey, my dear friends, if you're finding joy in our content and would like to support our channel, please contemplate subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support means the world to us and will enable us to bring forth more captivating and fresh content. And a beautiful comment, as striking as the beauty of your eyes, my handsome friend, would truly touch our hearts. My encounter with black-eyed kids, please share. I'd like to know other people's thoughts, thank you. First, a quick intro about myself. I'm a 26 years old male. I work at a small private college in Michigan. I'm a normal, average guy. I like hockey, HBO shows, kayaking, and hiking camping. I have a girlfriend, love my dad and sister, and have a pet dog named Bear. While I keep an open mind, I don't believe in ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, and am not even too sure about God. The way I see it, if I haven't encountered it firsthand or seen documented, verifiable proof, then I keep a healthy amount of skepticism. There is one thing I do believe in now that I never did before. Hell, I didn't even know about it before. Black freaking eye kids. As I said earlier, I loved to hike and camp. For reasons too introspective to get into fully here, I just loved the solitude, peace, and serenity the outdoors provided me. My life is not overly stressful, chaotic, or dramatic, but every once in a while a man needs to get away from it all. Being alone in the wilderness gave me the opportunity to clear my head, be introspective, consider the facts of life. I loved the beauty of the natural world, and I try to appreciate the small and big things, from the smallest clover to the biggest mountain. Beauty is all around us. In a way, I think it's my belief in beauty that has helped me cope as well as I have with what I'm about to share. In late August of 2010, I set out for Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore located along Lake Michigan. I had scheduled 5 days off of work, and I planned on making the most of it. Sleeping Bear is one of my favorite parks in Lower Michigan. I know it to be a great place for some solitude, and having usually been abandoned by sun worshippers by mid-August, I knew I'd have most of the park to myself. So, I wasn't surprised when I arrived the 5th day, found my usually parking spot, a sand parking lot just yards from the lake, and didn't see another person. As I sat on the hood of my car overlooking the beach and the lake, I remember breathing deeply and saying aloud, "Thank God for solitude." I ate lunch, walked down the beach, and put my bare feet into the water. Cold, very cold. It didn't matter to me, though, because I didn't come to swim. I came to hike and to camp. I came to, as was my tradition, sit by a warm fire on a cool night, sipping on my flask of whiskey, enjoying the sounds of the forest. However, this peaceful tradition didn't happen. The proper procedure when camping at a state or national park, if you've never been, is to check in at a ranger station. There you pay your fees, obtain your backcountry pass, if you're going to be camping in the backcountry, as I always do, and give the rangers your information, license plate number, make and model of your car, etc. After my quick stop off at the beach to eat my lunch, I headed to the nearby, a 15 or so minute drive, and get my affairs in order. The Platte River Ranger Station is manned until mid-October, I think. So it was open, and I didn't have to travel to the main station a 1-2 hours drive north. I park in the station's parking lot and walk into the office. The ranger and I spoke for a little, and he asks me for my license plate number. I knew he was going to ask, but I still forgot to write it down before I went in, so I walk back out toward my car, and I see 2 kids sitting at a bench just in front of where I'm parked. They weren't there when I parked, and I didn't notice them when I walked into the station, but at this point in time, I'm still on cloud 9. I'm happy to be on vacation, so I take no real notice. I walk to the back of my car, jot down the license plate number, and walk back to office. I take care of business in the office and step out and walk to the connecting bathroom. The backcountry area I'm staying at, White Pine, has a pit toilet. Think Port-a-John, but just with a deep hole in the ground, but I'd like to use a real bathroom while I can. I go into the restroom and go into the empty stall. As I'm taking care of my business, I hear the bathroom door open. I hear whispered voices. It's a small bathroom, but I can't make out what the voices are saying. I can tell they're kids' voices, though, and I figure it's the kids I saw near my car earlier. No biggie, right? I finish up and open the stall door. Sure enough, there are the 2 kids standing outside the stall. I remember saying, "It's all yours," as I walked to the sink. The kids just stood there. When you think about it now, in reading, the situation seems a little spooky, but at the time, and if you were in the situation yourself, I'd bet that you wouldn't be the slightest bit worried, and neither was I. I was my hands and glance in the mirror, only to notice the kids are looking right at me. This is the first time, but certainly not the last time, on this trip that my spine tingles with fear. The goddamn kids have completely black eyes. No whites to their eyes at all. Like I said, this is a pretty small bathroom, and they were not more than 3 feet away. At first, I can't do or say anything. I am literally frozen with fear. The water runs over my hands, but I can't feel it. I'm so deep inside my head at this moment that all I can hear are my thoughts, which were something like, "Ah!" All joking aside, I was petrified. It was only when one of the kids, a brown-haired boy that I would guess was around 12, took a step toward me that my fight or flight instincts took over control from my fear. I turned off the water, why I bothered I don't know habit, I guess, and moved a step back from the kids and toward the door. Seemingly sensing my fear, the boy didn't take another step toward me. Instead, he stopped. On retrospect, I can guess he was trying to keep from frightening me too much. "Didn't work, kid. Can you help us?" That's what the boy said when one of us finally spoke. For a moment, I did want to help. I consider myself a pretty nice guy. I'd go out of my way to help pregnant women carry groceries to their car. I'd rescue cats from trees if the situation arose, and for a while, I thought that is why I wanted to help those creepy kids. I thought my sheer decency was what made me, despite my better judgment and despite my fear, want to help them. Only since I began researching the Becks do I realize that I didn't want to help those kids, but whatever magical, mystical, voodoo power they have made me want to help them. I can't tell you with any certainty how long I stood motionless thinking about helping those kids, but it seemed like an eternity. Finally, like a physical shaking of my brain, I said, "No, not right now. I gotta go." And then I left the bathroom. I remember in that 2 seconds, my back was turned on those kids to me leaving the bathroom. I felt certain I was going to die. I thought as soon as my back was turned, they were going to tear me to shreds. It was with knee-buckling relief that I left the bathroom and walked out into the midday sun. I walked the 15 or so feet to my car, on noodle-like legs, too afraid to look behind me. I fumbled for my keys and unlocked my door, sat down, closed the door, and locked it. Only then, in the safety of my locked car, did I feel safe enough to look back toward the bathroom. Damned if the little bastards weren't standing just outside the bathroom, staring at me with the big, black, soul-sucking eyes. I want to take a moment to explain a little bit more about myself. I'm not a big man, but I'm not small either. I'm 6 foot with shoes on, I always say, and am around 185 pounds. What I'm saying is, I can take a couple 12-year-olds in a fight. I assume, having never actually fought any 12-year-olds since I was 12 myself. In my hiking, I've encountered odd people before. I've turned a bend in a trail only to startle a huge grizzly bear. I've been lost once, and ran out of water once, and I even had a tree fall in the middle of my campsite during a gale-swept night in Tennessee, as I was drifting off to sleep. However, not a single event in my life scared me nearly as much as those kids. So, there I am in my car staring at those kids, and them staring at me. I can't take my stare away from them, and they start for my car. Startled to my senses, I turn the key, throw it in reverse, and get the hell out of there. I drive off, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. I know that if I do look back, that I'll see those black eyes looking back at me. I turn onto the main road and head the short drive north to my campsite. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell are you still camping? To be honest, I can't tell you why. I was just so much in shock that I wasn't really thinking. It wasn't until I was parked in the sand lot at the head of the White Pine Trail that my brain started functioning again. The drive home would only take 3 hours. I could make it home in time for dinner, but for some reason I talked myself out of it. Sitting in my car, in the sun, on the beach, has a way of taking away all bad feelings. I just talked away my better judgment. I won't be doing that again. It's around 3 o'clock, and I know that the sun will start to set in around 3 or 4 hours, so I know I should head toward my camping spot. It's not a very long walk from the parking lot to the White Pine Backcountry Campground, but it will take around 45 minutes, leaving me just a couple hours to set up camp, gather firewood, cook dinner, and eat before nightfall. Fuck it, I remember saying to myself. I get my pack out of my back seat and take off down the trail. Now, there are 2 ways to access the White Pine Campground from where I was parked. I could either head through the woods, or I could walk along the beach. The wooded trail is quicker and shorter, and the beach trail is harder on the legs and lungs. Walking with a 50-pound pack in the sand is no picnic. However, considering what I just went through, I decided to go along the beach. It was the more open, brighter, kinder trail. To reach the campsite from the beach trail, you have to turn away from the lake and go about 1 to a mile into the woods. Reaching my campsite, I find it, unfortunately, completely empty. The campground has 7 sites, I think, and not a one of them was taken. Usually this would be a happy thing to me, but this time I wished for all my might for a little company. I pick a site hidden fairly well from the trail, feeling that I didn't need anyone walking along to spot my tent. I unpack and set up my ultralight 1-person tent, put down my sleeping pad, and unroll my 0-degree rated mummy bag. Taking my walking stick, a sawed-off hockey stick, and a folding knife with me, I head into the forest to gather firewood. I pile up a good-sized pile, 3 times larger than I think I'll need, and proceed to light a fire. I cook my food and eat, all the while watching the sun set through the trees. What is normally a beautiful, warming sight to me now only brings dread. I do not want to be out here, I suddenly realize. I finish eating quickly and decide to gather even more firewood. I do not want to run out in the middle of the night. As the darkness descends upon the woods and my campsite, I get the fire going and riffle through my pack looking for my flask. This was a situation that called for a little liquid courage. I hit it hard. In the woods, the sun sets at first slower than you think, and then near the end, it just kind of falls out of the sky and is gone in a blink. So it did that night. Sitting next to the fire, I decide to move my tent closer to me, so I click on my flashlight, and move my tent until it is right behind the small bench next to the fire ring. I like having the tent behind me, protecting my back as I saw it. I'm glad I decided to gather more firewood because I'm burning through it quickly, keeping the fire as high as I am. Even though it is early autumn and the temperature was probably in the 40s, I was hot sitting so close to such a big fire. Part of getting away from it all for me is to leave my phone in the car. In civilization, I don't use a watch. I just look at my cell. However, this night I wish I had my cell on me. Not to call someone, there is no service, but to check the time. I wanted it to be late. I wanted the night to fly by and give me the security of morning. I finished the whiskey and wished that I had brought the bottle with me from the car. The spirits had done their job, though, and I was a bit calmer. Also, praise be to God, I was feeling sleepy too. Though the rules say, don't go to bed with your fire burning, I sure as hell was not going to sleep without the fire. I got in my tent, leaving the flap open, with just the bug flap closed so I could see the fire, and tried to sleep. I don't know how long I lay there before slept found me, but I did eventually drift off. Thankfully, I can't remember having any dreams. I woke to a dead fire and the early dusk light coming in. I have to say I was slightly surprised to be alive. As dawn turned in today, I felt more and more foolish for the fear I felt yesterday. Being a usually calm, cool, and collected guy, I couldn't explain the intense dread and fear I felt when I saw those kids, but I did my best to ignore it, and I explained away their eyes pretty easily. I told myself the kids were camping at the Platte River campground, same location as the ranger station I registered at. They had some colored contact lenses and were playing a joke. Simple, possible, even probably considering the alternative. I ate breakfast and then made upon hindsight, horrible decision. I decided to stay another night. After breakfast, I gathered firewood so that I wouldn't have to gather any when I got back for the evening. My pile of wood at a towering height, I hiked back to my car along the wooded trail. I was feeling awfully stupidly brave that morning. I arrived at my car and decided to go to the dune climb. The dune climb is a trail that begins at a towering dune and ends 112 miles away at Lake Michigan. This hike was uneventful but beautiful, providing me even more determination not to let myself be scared off by some stupid kids with contact lenses. I got back to my car from the round trip Hika right around 1:1. I got out my small camp stovey and cooked some soup. Finished with lunch, I decided that next I would take the scenic drive. I forget the name of the road that is part of the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. It's a winding drive with several scenic and educational pull-offs. It's relaxing and beautiful. I finished with that around 3 turquoise, and I decided I would head to Traverse City, just a 45-minute drive away, and do a little shopping and grab an early dinner at a nice steakhouse. This is not something I normally do while camping, but after the previous night's events, I decided to treat myself. Traverse City is a nice town to visit if you ever have the chance, just a recommendation. I went to this steakhouse just outside of Traverse around 4:30, figuring a quick dinner and 45-minute drive and an hour walk would get me to my camp at just about dusk. But that's not what happened. The restaurant was packed. I got a table fairly quickly, but the service was very slow. In the end, I didn't get out of the restaurant until dusk. Cursing myself, it began to rain as I drove back to the trailhead parking lot. By the time I was at the lot and parked, it was full-blown nighttime. Sitting in the parking lot, listening to the wind and the rain, I was pretty damn scared again. I think that if nearly all of my gear wasn't still at the campsite then, I would have just drove home and said screw it. However, I couldn't abandon several $100s worth of camping equipment because I was scared. I'm not a pussy. I gear up, flashlight, pocket knife, water bottle, headlamp, and walking stick. Again, I had 2 options, through the woods or along the beach. The storm clouds blocked out most of the star and moonlight, so I would have been kidding myself to think that the beach would have been better lit, but it was still more open and provided me with a better feeling. So I took the beach path. The path is only 1.5 miles long along the beach, and then another 1-2 mile into the woods to the campsite. I figured if I hustled, I could be at my campsite in just over 1-2 an hour. I turn on my headlamp and move off down the beach. The wind is hitting pretty hard, and it's pretty damn cold, but I'm prepared. My coat has a nice rain shell, and I'm not getting too wet. Hiking in the dark is not smart in the best of circumstances. In this area, there are cougars and bear, both rare, but the real danger is getting lost or stumbling over something and injuring yourself. However, I wasn't too worried about any of that. The animals are so rare in that area, it'd take very bad luck to get bothered by them, and the beach was clear of most debris that I might trip on. What had me worried was a creeping sensation of paranoia. As I walked, the sensation of paranoia and dread grew. I stopped every 10 feet or so to look around, lighting the tall grass next to the beach and before the woods with my headlamp. I opened my jaw and listened. You can hear better with your mouth slightly open, but I saw nothing and heard nothing. I'd walk another 10 feet and just know that someone was watching me. It was hard to hear anything over the lapping waves of the lake and the howling wind of the storm, but I swear I heard voices in the tall grass. I'd been walking probably 1-2 an hour, and I knew I would be meeting off with the trail leading into the woods and to my campsite any second now. But then my world fell apart. Having one of my strongest moments of feeling watched, I turned around, facing the direction I came, and there they were. The boy who spoke to me earlier couldn't have been more than 5 feet away, and the other boy, the quiet boy, was standing slightly behind him. Each of the boys stood motionless, staring, just staring. At this moment, I'm not sure I have the ability to put my terror into words. The best way I can describe it is to say, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was in the hospital and the doctor just told me I had moments to live. The talkative boy moved toward me. The only light on the beach came from my headlamp. Neither kid had any sort of flashlight. My lead beam flashed across their faces, reflecting grotesquely in their large, dark eyes. The waves crashed and the wind blew. Help us. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. The boy moved closer. The quiet boy stepped to the side, almost like he was slowly circling behind me, and that broke the spell. I'm not fucking helping you, I said. We're lost. We can't find our campsite. Is this a game? I asked, even though I knew it wasn't. Take us with you, please. We'll die out here. We're afraid. I call bullshit on that one. They're scared, I thought to myself. I'm scared. You're the one with the creepy eyes, the vacant, hollow voices. You're the ones with the fish-eye stare. The quiet boy moved a little more. He was now standing beside me, just a couple feet away. The talkative boy was still in front of me, blocking the way I had come, blocking the path back to my car. Then things got even weirder. Okay, you can come with me, I said. There was no life at the campground. When I arrived at the campground, I made a wide circle of it, looking both for other campers and for the little devils. I saw nothing and no one. I made my way as quietly as possible to my tent. I unzipped the fly and crawled in. I thought briefly about a fire, but decided that would be more of a signal to the kids than deterrence. My clothes were sopping wet and I was still very cold. I had to take them off. My pack is leaning against a tree about 15 feet from my tent. Inside are clean, dry clothes, sealed tightly in a wet bag. However, now that I'm inside the tent, I'm sure as hell not going back out. The tent gave me some sense of security, even though it wasn't in any way secure. Now naked, I crawl inside my mummy bag. I'd like to say how much I hate that it's called a mummy bag. After a few moments I warm up, but the shivering takes another 1 to 3 hours or so to subside. As I'm lying there, I'm wishing so much that I had that bottle of whiskey in my car. The rain plays against the leaves of the trees, and the wind creaks the branches. Under the best of circumstances, this is a night where a person's mind can get away from them. For me, it was utter terror. My imagination made every creak, every howl of the wind into something sinister. As the hours passed and my adrenaline faded, I felt immensely tired. I wanted so badly just to fall asleep. In sleep, I wouldn't know I was being eviscerated. I'd either wake up or I wouldn't. I thought it was a nightmare at first. When I heard the voice say, "something," I thought I was dreaming. But then sleep cleared from my head and I realized I was awake. It was still night and the storm was still biting. "Help us," an unmistakable voice said. I couldn't help it. It was a gut reaction. I screamed. I lay naked, my mummy bag zipped up to my chin. I was completely helpless. I felt like a newborn baby, my fate completely held in the hands of others. "Please let us in." "No," I screeched, and then again, "No." "It's so cold. Please let us in, mister." I stopped replying and could only sob. Like a heartbroken teenage girl, like a woman who just learned her sister died. I sobbed. I was so uncontrollably scared that I think it helped me not pay attention to the kids' demands, at least not fully. "Let us in." I tugged the pull string on the hood of my mummy bag until I was completely enveloped. I just kept repeating, not daring to listen to the kids, the word no. No, 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 no. I waited for death. I knew it was coming. Any second and I'd be ripped to shreds. The kid kept saying something, but I wasn't listening. I wouldn't listen. I knew how overwhelming their hypnotic power was. I did everything I could not to listen. I kept chanting my mantra, kept howling my no's. I don't know when I fell asleep, but the next thing I know, I startle awake. The sun is shining, and I'm alive. I don't know how, but I'm alive. I look around my small tent, and I don't see anything amiss on the inside. It takes me several minutes to gather the courage necessary to unzip the tent fly, but finally I do. I peek my head out, but see no one. Naked, I run to my pack and grab my clothes in the dry bag. I toss some clothes on and race back to the tent. I tear it down in a matter of moments. I pack my sleeping bag and pad and tent onto my pack and take off down the trail. I decide one more time to take the beach trail. In the sun and warmth of the morning, it's an entirely different trail. The only moment I'm given pause is when I come across a duck with what seems to be its heart torn out. I took a photo with a disposable camera in my pack and move on. I arrive at my car and find it unmolested. I get in and drive home. It's been almost 2 entire months since this happened, but I still remember it all like it was yesterday. I haven't gone camping since, and I don't know if I'll ever feel safe hiking again. Maybe I'll go camping again sometime in the future, but I'm bringing a friend. No more going it alone. I, thankfully, haven't seen any more black eye kids. I don't want to posit on what they are. I don't want to think about whether they are demons or monsters, aliens or hybrids. I was interested at first. I did some research because I wanted to know if I was crazy. I don't care what you think they are. I don't care why they are. I just wanted to know that I wasn't the only one who has had this experience. I'm not, and I'm thankful for that. My advice, if you ever do encounter a beck, don't listen to it to speak. Don't be polite in case they're just weird kids. Don't question their validity. Don't worry about looking silly or that others will think you're crazy. Just run. Run and don't look back.